Hey, howdy, welcome back. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're back. Okay, so first off, oh my god, these videos are in order of character design, like of when I designed them, not story stuff, which I'm realizing now is like janky as fuck, but whatever. We're here, so, I'm not changing it. Obviously, as I just said, Hummel was my second design. He actually hasn't gone through a ton of change. Unlike Anthony, he genuinely looks a lot like his original design. So I do have an old painting I did. I actually never designed him digitally until pretty recently, which I do have old art of him that I did digitally as well, so I'll put that up. Which, it's old, I hate it. His original design is definitely I'm just a guy. I'm out here just making it and doing cool shit. And, his final design is I've killed people. But, we'll get into that in a minute. More about Hummel himself. Hummel is actually one of my quote-unquote older characters. He's 38, and that's not really old. That's still considered a young adult, technically. But he has not aged super well. He's a really stressed individual, and he definitely wears it on his face. He doesn't sleep much. He's got issues. And again, he wears it. He is actually married. Who wouldn't marry that? But, there'd be crazy people out there. He's married with 2 kids currently. So his family lives in a town called Graveyard, which I think I went over a little bit in Anthony's video, but it's a town of outlaws that pretty much is no cops are allowed here, we're our own township, stay away. Kind of similar to Garden City. They pretty much just put all the criminals to Garden City, which is horrible, but anyway. He's not really home super often. He works a majority of the time, except for, winter. And I'm talking, the thick of winter, when you're getting snowed in kind of thing. He usually takes December and January off, so he's home for about 2 months out of the year. He comes home occasionally, but like I said, he really is not home very often. Talking about Hummel's kids, Hummel has 2 sons. His oldest is 15, which his name is Hummel Jr., but they just call him Junior. They've called him that since he was a kid, but especially nowadays, Junior really does not like his dad. Hummel is a mercenary for hire, specifically a murder for hire, and handles unwanted business at a high price. And Junior, at a young age, he learned, but after witnessing what happened to Anthony, he's like, oh my god, my dad is evil as fuck. Junior is kind of constantly watching himself to make sure he turns out nothing like his dad, because he does not want to be like that. Which, fair, bro. But, you just have to be nice and not kill people, and you're steps ahead of this man. Anyway, Jamie is their youngest at the moment. Jamie is 8 years old. And since he's 8, Junior and pretty much everybody keeps him out of the loop since he's a child. So he still is very fond of his dad. He loves his dad. And Hummel greatly appreciates it, but is aware that it's pretty much based on a lie. Jamie doesn't know his dad, and that's why he still loves his dad. It's a very complicated family relationship. Hummel's personality, he's an architect, INTJ-T, so 82% introverted. He's a very quiet man, doesn't really have a lot to say unless it's business-oriented. He's a man of few words for the most part. 55% intuitive, 54% thinking, 65% judging. Bro, this guy he thinks everybody else has gotten it easy, and he's had to work really hard just to get where he's at, which he has, but again, we'll get into his story in just a second. And then 85% turbulent. And if you want to read more on that, feel free, but there ain't no quiz here, baby, so you're good. Also, I think I went into way too much detail with Anthony's video, so I'm not gonna do that anymore, because that video was hella long. So his backstory. His mom was a soiled dove, as they say, a hurdy-turdy girl. She was a hoe. She was a whore. His dad was a Welsh man that came to America, and once he found out he was going to be a father, he was like, okay. His mom's name is Dorcas. His dad's name is Frost. So Dorcas and Frost decide to settle down, and she and Frost continued to have children. Dorcas eventually ended up taking Hummel's siblings and leaving Hummel because his father was very abusive, so she left and took his siblings, but left one child so Frost wouldn't come after her. Obviously, childhood was not very great for Hummel. Hummel dropped out of school because his dad wasn't really enforcing anything, and he just didn't see a point in it, which, children don't really know, but again, when you don't have a parent to point you in the right direction, you're kind of on your own. So at 12 years old, he actually joined a traveling circus, became a trapeze artist, and never returned home. He refused to even perform in the town that his dad lived nearby. So his new family adopted him, taught him, the trapeze and everything, and he actually finally had a pretty stable life. They moved a lot, but they were very consistent with day-to-day life. It was a very consistent life for the first time in his life. So at 19, he had a major accident, and he fell... Dude, I totally forgot the height. Anyway, it was very high up. He fell and landed on his left side, which broke his left shoulder, ribs, his left arm and hand, and his left hip broken. So it took him months to even walk again, and he still walks with a pretty exaggerated limp. And his left hand is deformed because he never got it properly. He ended up deciding that he was a burden to his family, but his family begged him to stay. But again, he knew that he would just be costing them money with no reward, so he left. He found a doctor in town who gave him laudanum, which was outlawed in the 1900s, so probably about 1910 it was outlawed, so it was still legal to give him that medicine. This was in 1871, so this was like 30 years before, technically 40. Anyway, Hummel starts working odd jobs here and there. He's kind of bouncing from town to town. He's pretty directionless. He's just kind of going where the wind takes him. He usually just lives in hotels, kind of thing. So Hummel's going from job to job, town to town. For the most part, he doesn't keep a job very well because he's a pretty rough and tumble dude. So he'll get into fights with patrons. If they bitch at him, he'll bitch back. If they make comments, he'll attack them. So he's not a super stable individual. Finally, he finds a small town. So this is in Nevada. Originally a mining settlement that has just kind of turned into a town. He gets a job at the general store, and they hire him, but they do say, like, after the first 2 times, they're like, dude, you cannot be attacking our patrons. Like, those are our paying customers. So instead of working the front, he usually just stocks, makes deliveries. He's not really in the store all that often. And people tend to avoid him anyway because he's got a really mean disposition. So one of these nights, he goes to a bar, and it's a family bar, locally owned bar, and this is where he meets his wife. So Clara and her family own the saloon and hotel in this town. She and her sisters all work the bar. They serve drinks, they break up fights. 2 of her sisters sing. so they provide the entertainment. But Hummel starts going to this bar, notices Clara, and then keeps going to the bar even if he's not drinking. So they start talking and they become good friends, and then a couple months later they start dating. And then a few months after that, Hummel proposes, so they've been dating for about 10 months, and they marry within the month. So Hummel decides it's time for a quote-unquote real job, because the general store is a real job. But he decides he wants to do better for his wife and maybe, hopefully, get rich. Or at least rich enough to support a family, kind of thing. So they travel to Montana, more specifically Helena, Montana. Anyway, so while he's there, they're staying at a hotel, and he finds a familiar face. A childhood friend that he hasn't seen since he left for the circus. They greet, they hug, they start talking, and it's actually Rayford. So Rayford says that he owns a ranch and would love to offer him a job. So Hummel takes him up on it, and they move to Eagle Rock Settlement, 1874, and this is when, they find a new job as well. They live on a small cabin on the property. Rayford doesn't usually hire married men just because it's usually they have families, but the small cabin provides enough for Hummel and Clara, so he agrees to let them live in their own place. So pretty soon after, Hummel is offered a new job. Now, this is better pay, but a much bigger risk. Hummel takes it and starts robbing trains initially. So it's usually just trains and stagecoaches. He keeps his face covered. He's got a pretty low profile. There's only been 1 or 2 towns that have found his identity. And Clara explains after moving into the posse house that she does not like living in this house. She's surrounded by dangerous men all the time. She doesn't really feel like talking to any of them. At this point, there's no women around, really. So Hummel brings it up to Rayford, and Rayford is like, well, I'll give you enough money to buy property, and Hummel explains he'd like to keep it a secret because then no one can bother her, and Rayford agrees. So Hummel moves Clara to Graveyard, the outlaw town, and he goes home anytime he can. Again, he keeps the location secret from everyone, including Rayford, so Clara can just be left alone. So, in 1875, so a year later, Clara is pregnant, and in October, she has Hummel Jr. Hummel actually takes probably like a month or 2 off when he's born, and then, so it all equals out to about 4 months off, 4 or 5 months off. So he takes care of his wife and the baby during that time. So then over time, Rayford and Hummel become good friends again, kind of reminiscing on childhood. Ray offers another new opportunity. This is an even bigger money opportunity, which Hummel's already doing pretty well. He's pretty comfortable, so more money means even more comfortability for him and his family. But now it's an even bigger risk, but Hummel is, he's kind of like, it's something I can handle, especially with the risks he's already taken. Rayford also mentions the drag on a man's conscience, which initially Hummel kind of steps back from and is like, because he starts killing for $1. And obviously in the beginning, Hummel takes it relatively well, but he's rationalizing it. And over time, he just becomes extremely numb to it. Killing is just a job. There's no one getting hurt in his mind. It's just the way of the world. So, Hummel, a couple years later, in early January of 1877, one of the people that he's after gets a pretty lucky break and cuts him in the face, and that's how he's got that big old scar on his face. Also, Hummel is now wanted in 5 out of the 38 states currently, wanted dead or alive. He's been found out, and he's a pretty brutal dude. So Hummel's job is to tie up any loose ends for the ranch, for the posse and the ranch. So if anybody sees something they're not supposed to, says something they're not supposed to, even like borrowing money is a killable offense in his mind. In 1878, in July, Jamie is born. Hummel only takes a week off and then gets right back to work. So Hummel really doesn't spend a lot of time with his boys, and he teaches them what he thinks is crucial to a boy's life, but for the most part, he doesn't spend much time with them because he's working all the time. Hummel is now Rayford's second in command and handles some business even within the ranch itself. Usually he keeps himself away from the cattle ranching and beef part, but now he's in it. He's threatening those who get in the way. He's handling certain things within even the cattle ranchers. Hummel doesn't live in the posse house. He lives with Ray in the mansion, but he goes over to the posse house pretty often to handle, jobs or see if there's any loose ends, talking with the men, but it's strictly business. Otherwise, the men don't really know him super well, nor do they like him very well. Hummel's a bit of an ass. He's not very kind at all, doesn't really have much to say, usually talks a lot of shit about the posse members. Chester actually initially is his friend because he understands Hummel's just doing his job, and he's just one of those that's very strict about his job. He wants to do it right, and Chester can respect that. So eventually, in 1887, Hummel handles, quote-unquote, Anthony's gossiping. So Anthony intercepts something that was meant for Ray that kind of blows his whole mission out of the water. Anthony is now aware that Rayford is a corrupt man himself. He's not doing anything to help. So he starts telling the other guys. Hummel comes up with the plan to just scare him into silence. So initially it does work, and Hummel doesn't admit to anything. Hummel has yet to admit to this, so Anthony to this day still has no idea that the reason he lost his eye was because Hummel suggested it. He is aware that the reason his eye was taken is to scare him into silence, which it worked for a little while, but he doesn't know. He thinks it was just Rayford that planned that. So again, Anthony starts talking again about how he knows that his eye was just a scare tactic. Hummel handles his kidnapping. He plans it all out. He pays the people who initially take him, and he talks to Rayford's crazed millionaire friend. After the rescue, Hummel has a moment of clarity where he's like, oh my god, I've caused this. This is all my fault. But then he convinces himself that it's all Anthony's fault because Hummel told him to stop talking. Hummel admits to having Anthony kidnapped, which, there's the fallout within the family, and he's kicked off of the property. He returns to Hell's Ranch and continues working, and during the year that he is not home, his killings become the most brutal they've ever been. So Hummel comes back home and gets into an argument with Anthony. Anthony tells him that he can be home, but he's not going to be here to be with him. So Anthony goes home, and Hummel spends his time thinking. Hummel Jr. won't speak to him. Clara is still very distant, but they start talking. But again, it's a difficult conversation, and there's a lot of fallout here. Even his youngest son is kind of wary of him. Later on, Clara and him are on better terms, but Clara pretty much tells them we're never to speak of that again, and she puts it in the back of her mind because what else can she do? In her mind, that's the only thing she can do. She also makes him promise that he won't talk about work anymore. That's another big thing between them, is he doesn't get to talk about work at home, which, yeah. So then, Hummel finds damning evidence on Rayford, which also blows his whole perception out of the water, and urges Chester and Anthony to run. And then we end up at the start of the comic. So, that's pretty much it for this video. But yeah, if you enjoyed today, please like and subscribe. But first of all, thank you so much for listening in, dude. I get so excited when I see, like, even a couple views. It's just exciting. But anyway, I hope your day, week, month, whatever, your whole life, I hope it goes well. And I hope good things keep coming your way. So, anyway, peace out. Thank you so much. Goodbye.